A little later. Welcome, everybody. We're about to start our hearings today. And first up, we have from DBM payments to civil divisions of the state, and Jason Kramer, our analyst, is here to report to us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be presenting the analysis for payments to civil divisions of the state. This portion of the budget is comprised of three items: disparity grants to low wealth jurisdictions. That's based on a formula set in statute. Grants to mitigate the impact of the local assumption of a portion of teacher retirement costs, and those amounts are set in statute. And then also gaming grants to Calvert County. As shown here, the budget increases by $5.3 million in the fiscal 2024 allowance. Turning to Exhibit 1. Exhibit 1 shows each county's various grant amounts in the fiscal 2024 allowance. The first column is the disparity grant, and then the teacher retirement supplemental grant and the gaming grants. Turning then to page 3, disparity grants are state funding targeted at the difference in counties' abilities in raising revenue from their local income tax. Counties with a local per capita tax revenues less than 75% of the statewide per capita local tax revenue are eligible for grants in the amount of the difference between their revenue and 75% of the statewide average. There's also a soft cap on the grant based on the county's 2010 grant amount and the county's tax rate. The cap can be increased based on the county's income tax rate. Moving on to Exhibit 2, the income tax data for this formula is provided in an annual report from the comptroller, which is based on income tax returns that are received by November 1st of each tax year. The report was provided to DBM and DLS in early December. However, delays in processing returns led the comptroller to issue a revised report in mid-January showing much higher tax revenue. Based on the updated information, the disparity grant is underfunded by $53.6 million as shown in Exhibit 2. DLS has asked DBM to comment on the potential for a supplemental budget to correct the underfunding. There are appendices at the back of the analysis that compare the two calculations. With that, I conclude my presentation and be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Going once, going twice. Okay. Thank you. Secretary Nicole. Oh, and Secretary Greg, I didn't realize you were here. Thank you.
Good afternoon, senators and members of the committee. I'm Helene Grady, acting secretary of Department of Budget and Management, and I'm joined by Mark Nicole, our deputy secretary. Thanks to Jason and DLS for the analysis. We are here to say that we concur with the DLS analysis, and also to share that the administration plans to propose an additional $53.6 million in funding through a supplemental budget to fully fund the disparity grant formula based on the revised income tax data provided by the comptroller's office, as Jason explained. And we're happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for the secretary? You and the analysts have set a model for eloquence and brevity. We appreciate it very, very much.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. The next topic is the State Retirement Agency, and Mr. Kramer is back at the desk.
We need to do anything with the screen sharing? I think you all have the paper documents in front of you, right? Okay. Again, I'm Jason Kramer, and I'll be presenting the analysis for the State Retirement Agency. The Retirement Agency, at the direction of the Board of Trustees, has primary responsibility over the state's retirement systems. The fiscal 2024 allowance, as you can see on the first page, is $54.2 million. It's an increase of $5.7 million from fiscal 2023. The agency is funded through an administrative charge on all employers for whom the agency administers retirement benefits. State agencies account for roughly a third of SRA's budgeted funding, which is represented by reimbursable funds on the chart, while local school boards and governmental units make up the rest of the budgeted funding that's represented by special funds. The investment division is non-budgeted and makes up 40% of the allowance and represents most of the increase in fiscal 2024 spending. We'll turn next to Exhibit 1 on page 4, discuss a few performance measures for the agency. Exhibit 1 on page 4 shows membership in the state's retirement system by active employees and retirees. Active membership has been flat since fiscal 2012, while retirees have increased, accounting for 47% of plan participation in fiscal 2020. The flattening out of active participation means that there's less payroll supporting retiree benefits, which results in a need for higher employee contributions. To Exhibit 2 on page 5. Exhibit 2 on page 5 shows the share of members in the plan's pre and post reforms of 2011. For the first time in fiscal 2022, there are more members in the reform plan than in the pre-reform plan. Turning to Exhibit 3 on page 6. This exhibit shows SRA's call center wait times. The agency has struggled for several years to meet wait time and drop call goals. The agency attributes the issue primarily to staffing shortages. The allowance includes 4 new positions for the call center, 3 benefits specialists and an administrative specialist, which will add to the call center's capacity. Turning to Exhibit 4 on page 7. Exhibit 4 shows the thank you, Kim. Exhibit 4 shows an overview of the agency's fiscal 2024 allowance. The budget consists of 2 components, the investment division and SRA's overall administrative costs. Operations make up 60% of the allowance, with personnel making up the largest component of those costs. Turning to Exhibit 5 on page 8. Exhibit 5 compares the fiscal 2024 budget to fiscal 2023. Within the administration division, cost increases are due primarily to personnel costs, including the cost of 5 new positions, 4 in the call center that I had previously mentioned, plus a new program manager to take on responsibility of the MPAS 3 IT project. Data storage costs related to that project increased by $347,000 as the agency transitions away from paper and also sees data needs increase due to in-house portfolio management. Those increases are offset by a $181,000 decrease in MPAS contractual costs as the IT project finishes in fiscal 2023. The non-budgeted investment division is where most of the agency's budget increase occurs. Regular earnings and fringe benefit costs increased by $2.5 million, which is offset by a decrease in bonuses and other compensation. Those large increases are due to the division's salary setting authority. SRA anticipated approximately 10% annual salary growth for several years after the division was moved off budget to better align salaries with the market. In addition, the division adds 6 new positions at a cost of approximately $753,000 in fiscal 2024. That would bring the division to 47 positions, up from 26 in fiscal 2020. Turning to page 11, the first issue I'll discuss is regarding the system's performance in fiscal 2022. Exhibit 6 shows the state's investment performance by asset allocation. Total fund performance was minus 2.97%, and system assets totaled $64.6 billion at the close of the year. Turning to Exhibit 7 on page 12, this compares the system results to benchmarks across different investment types. While the system did experience a loss, it outperformed benchmarks by 0.5 percentage point, as shown here on Exhibit 7. Exhibit 8 on page 13. Another useful comparison for system performance is shown in Exhibit 8. This shows the system's TUX ratings or Wilshire Trust Universe Comparison Service. The system performed in the top 37% of comparable systems for both 1-year and 3-year returns. And all that put together, Exhibit 10 on page 15 shows the system's funding levels since 2006. The system closed fiscal 2022 with a 76.6% funded ratio and is now projected to hit the 80% funded mark by fiscal 2027. That's 2 years later than was projected last year, primarily due to the poor fiscal 2022 returns. The final issue I'll discuss is the system's amortization policies on page 16. As part of the pension reforms of 2013, the system's assets and liabilities are amortized over a single closed 25-year amortization period. This eliminated a projected spike in contributions at the time, but it was understood that the risk of volatility would return as the period neared its end. The agency created a group to review the policy and provide recommendations. The board focused on 2 options that are shown here in Exhibit 11. Option 1 generally reflects the best practices as described by the Conference of Consulting Actuaries, while option 2 mostly reflects best practices with the exception of the treatment of gains and losses. The board recommended option 2, which has a 15-year pooled rolling amortization period, as opposed to a 15-year layered closed periods. The pooled period means the amortization period is reset every year, while the layered closed period means that a new layer is added every year. The concern with the rolling pooled period is that the system doesn't approach full funding, while the concern with the layered and closed period is that while layers are added and fall off, there is the potential for contribution volatility. The Joint Pension Committee meeting during the interim, the committee voted to recommend the closed layered amortization period, but while also allowing for active management of the layers to avoid any volatility. Any changes to the policy require legislation, and it wasn't didn't have a bill number at the time of writing, but it's Senate Bill 466 would accomplish some of these changes. DLS recommends concurring with the governor's allowance, and with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Questions, anyone? Thank you very much. No, so. Yeah, right. Yeah, okay. Yep, so if we could bring up the panel for state retirement, whoever's coming forward. Mr. Naveen. Oh, Mr. Treasurer. Didn't see in the back there. Please, if you could kick this off. Good to see you.
How you doing, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee? Good afternoon, Chair Gazzoni, Vice Chair Rosapep, and members of the committee. Let me start by taking this opportunity to commend Mr. Jason Kramer, the budget analyst, for his excellent examination of our system. As the newly elected chairman of the Board of Trustees, I would like to say what an honor it is and has been to lead such a highly regarded panel of public servants whose sole concern is maintaining a secure pension system for the benefit of more than 413,000 members. It is important to note that reforms enacted by the General Assembly in 2011 and in subsequent years continue to show positive results for the system and in fact continue to exceed earlier projections. Required employer contributions for the coming fiscal year are projected to be 18.07% of payroll, significantly lower than the 20.15% predicted at the time of the 2011 reforms. As of June 30th of last year, the system's funded ratio is 77.2%, very close to the 77.3% predicted and higher than the 76.9% reported last year. The system is on track to be 80% funded by 2026, 85% funded by 2030, and 100% funded by 2039. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to our Executive Director, Martin Nolan.
Thank you, Treasurer. And good morning, or good afternoon. Chairman Gazzoni, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to be here today. It's great to be here in person. This is my first time doing this in person, and it all feels very natural and normal. I appreciate that. I want to thank Jason Kramer for the outstanding analysis. Very thorough. We appreciate working with him. The retirement system is very strong. I hope you could take that away from the information you provided. The treasurer pointed to two kind of data sets. One is when we're going to be fully funded, which is very important. But the truth is that if you have an amortization policy that gets you to a date, we're going to get to that date one way or the other. The good news is that the contributions are not as high as they were projected during the reforms, and those contributions haven't been very volatile. And that's what's important, because that's what's going to keep the system strong, because employers can pay the employer contributions, right, if they're not volatile and they don't jump around a lot. And that's one thing that Maryland's done that's fantastic, is the smoothing of those investment returns is very important, coupled with fantastic work from our investment team. We were actually able this year to improve our funded status just slightly, even though we had a down year. And that's what keeps things moving strongly. I do want to, if I'm going to say the investment team did a fantastic job, I want to provide a little bit of detail to explain. We lost a little bit of money this year. We were down 2.97%. And when the investment team told me about that, they were apologetic, because you always want to be positive, not negative. But any investor during the market we had 2 years ago, and we had our record returns, any investor can have great returns when the markets are all going up, right? That doesn't take an investment genius to make that happen. Now, we were able to harvest more than our share, and we were very proud of that and very happy about that. But really where we proved our value is this year, when the markets were down, we were only down 2.97%. Now, if you look at pension funds as a whole, they were down on average at 9%. So you can do that. You can do the math there and figure out how many billions of dollars we saved the taxpayers ultimately by that prudent management. And a lot of times we come to these hearings, especially when markets are going up and everyone thinks they're an investment genius. Personally, because everyone's investments are going up, people start saying, why don't you just invest in a 60-40 fund? That's good enough for me. And it is good. It's a great way for individual investors and retail investors to maximize their returns in a very simple, cost-effective way. But if we would have, as a pension fund who has to pay benefits and has members relying on those benefits, if we would have had a 60-40 fund last year, we would have lost 15% versus the 2.97%, which would have cost the system about $9 billion. So being able to harvest the gains in the up markets, every money manager, when they come to us and talk to us and say we should give them money, talks about how, oh yeah, we're going to do well in up and down markets. It's very hard to do that. So being able to do well in an up market and control, the liabilities on the downside in a down market is really, really exceptional, and we're very proud of that. And that, with the smoothing, is what's really kept us going strongly in a down market. And that's why we need to, and we've been working with the Joint Committee on Pensions about the new amortization schedule to make sure that as we get closer, if there are different shocks to the system, that it won't get us off track, and we'll continue to be on track to being fully funded by 2039 without big increases or decreases, right, in employer contributions, trying to keep all of those that as flat as possible for budgetary purposes. So with that, I'll wrap up my remarks, and we're here to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you very much. Questions? You're very thorough.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Treasurer.
Thank you.
So I believe we can move on to the supplemental. Mr. Kramer. No, they were all part of it.
Thanks again, Mr. Chairman. One last time today. My name is Jason Kramer, and I'll be presenting the analysis for Maryland supplemental retirement plans. The MSRP provides employees with 4 supplemental retirement plan options and funds its operation with a fee on member accounts. As shown here on the first page, MSRP's fiscal 2024 allowance of $2.3 million in special funds is a slight increase from fiscal 2023. Exhibit 1 on page 2 shows the agency's spending in the fiscal 2024 allowance. As you can see, 3/4 of spending is for personnel, with other costs mostly for contractual services and rent. Then I will move on to exhibit 3 on page 5. Exhibit 3 shows plan expenses and revenues for the last 4 fiscal years. Participant fees are 50 cents per month and 0.11% of assets. That fee was reduced in February of 2022. In addition, there was a 3-month fee holiday at the end of 2022. The reason for this, as shown in the exhibit, is that MSRP had a fund balance of over $1 million, which is about 54% of expenses. The agency target is 25% of expenses. MSRP estimates a closing balance of 35% of expenses in fiscal 2023. Exhibit 4 on page 6 shows MSRP's plan option performance compared to benchmarks. Plan options did miss benchmarks slightly, only in the most recent 1-year period, but have exceeded benchmarks across longer time periods, as shown at the top of exhibit 4. And finally, on exhibit 5 on page 7, this exhibit shows membership and contribution levels. For many years, membership rate and contribution rate had been very stable. However, in fiscal 2022, there was a 13.7% drop in the number of members contributing to their supplemental plans. MSRP attributes this in part to federal legislation that expanded the reasons for withdrawing from a retirement account, which can also have the added effect of members then ending their contributions. DLS has asked MSRP to comment on the drop in membership and the drop in contributors. One other note I would add here is that Senate Bill 6 would require MSRP to automatically enroll new state employees in a supplemental retirement plan. With that, DLS recommends concurring with the governor's allowance, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Thank you very much. Spell and team. Afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Rhonda Bell, and I'm Executive Director of Maryland Supplemental Retirement Plans. Thank you for the opportunity to come before you today and discuss our budget and the very important work we do at the supplemental retirement plans. We do thank Mr. Kramer for his analysis, and we also thank DLS for concurring with the governor's budget allowance. So with that, I also want to introduce Deborah Roberts, who is our Deputy Executive Director and our CFO. And we are here and happy to answer any questions that you have for us today.
Senator Zucker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Spell, just had a quick question. So it looked like in the past there had been an audit finding regarding central payroll and just making sure that information matched. I just wanted to make sure that was being addressed.
Yes, actually, when the audit began in May of 2022, it was brought to my attention and to Ms. Roberts' attention, and we immediately got that straightened out, and we got the people in our office that needed to be trained to do that reconciliation between central payroll and the Workday system. So that's in place and running very smoothly.
Other questions? Figure while we've got you here, we might as well ask you about, you must have seen the piece of legislation. What thoughts you might have about that?
Senate Bill 6.
Yes.
Senate Bill 6 is necessary to support the employees in the state of Maryland, particularly those who don't make a lot of money. A lot of times when people make so little, they feel like they can't save for their retirement. But if they can't put away $25 or $35 per paycheck, then they're going to be really ill-served when they do retire. So it's very necessary. It's something that has been proven in the industry on a national level to be very effective, and particularly with the lower income employees in the state of Maryland, as we know, have the bulk of our employees are not making a lot of money.
Ringing endorsement. All right. Any questions? Thank you very much. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right, we are going to take a 10-minute break while the computers readjust.